Steve Stenger is headed to prison after pleading guilty to corruption charges. But there's more to the Democratic official's story than his fall from grace. St. Louis Public Radio's Jason Rosenbaum and Joe Mannies join me to look back at Stenger's tenure and demise.
This is Politically Speaking, the longest-running episodic podcast about Missouri politics.
It's a little complicated in Bolivar because there is a Parsons family there.
But we also knew that it was important to make sure that we got to where we needed to go.
You know, if you walk in a room and you're getting ready to make a decision and everybody in the room looks like you need to stop.
And right now what happens in the United States Senate is as critical as anywhere else in the country.
I really want the state to succeed.
Well, we want everybody to know that we're all working together.
I just worked hard to try to build my name where I didn't have the money.
Hi, this is Julie O'Donoghue. Welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, and I'm here in studio with
semi-retired political reporter Joe Mannies.
And Jason Rosenbaum.
Who is not semi-retired.
I'm still active, but I'm
fully retired. Fully employed.
I'm fully employed.
We're very excited to have Joe back in the studio with us. Or at least I am, because this is my first time doing a podcast.
You may regret it after a couple of minutes.
So why did we bring Joe back, Julie?
We are here to talk about Steve Stenger, now that the former St. Louis County Executive has been sentenced and is on his way to prison in September, once his third child is born.
Yes.
We're here to talk a little bit about his political career, and, personally, I have some curiosity about how much people saw this coming.
I don't think people are that surprised, just because people had accused Stenger of pay to play, which we'll get into in a minute. I think the surprise was how brazen he was with it, because I think we all just assumed that even if he was committing crimes, he wouldn't have telegraphed it so brazenly.
Well, I think that early on, okay, let's go back to Stenger's past, where the guy is a lawyer and an accountant. He literally sang his way through law school. He paid for law school by being part of a singing group. He had been a member as a county councilman from South St. Louis County, which is kind of a swing area. So his reputation at that time was as sort of a conservative Democrat, which there aren't that many of them. And he also was very assertive in challenging then County Executive Charlie Dooley on some issues, and actually became to prominence, in my view. He had been causing Dooley, he was disagreeing with Dooley about the budget and some other things, different things, but what really came into focus, and Jason wrote a lot about it, was this big furor over the county parks, where this was, 2011?
2011.
Yeah, where Dooley his administration proposed to close or curtail some of the county parks because of budget issues. And that was a big furor in the county because people love their parks. And St. Louis County no one had really seen it as having financial problems like they do in the city of St. Louis. Well, Stenger rode that pony, really, I think, for the next couple years. He became the hero of trying to protect the parks. He was big on trying to improve the animal shelter. He was doing all these things to try to really put a big coalition together.
I'm curious about when he was on the county council and before he was county executive, if some of this bullying behavior that he's been accused of I guess it's mostly the bullying, if that was apparent in any of his personality traits, or if it just seemed like he was kind of a tough, ambitious, aggressive person.
Well, as a reporter, I would say more. My impression was he was more tough and aggressive. I didn't see him as particularly bullying then.
Mm-hmm.
But the other people, others may have a different view on that point.
I think that he was trying to be the voice of opposition. And I think in any legislative body, when you're the voice of opposition, you kind of come off as aggressive and to some extent bullying. the current governor of Louisiana was the minority leader in the House. I'm sure that was his role, even if he wasn't like a mean person, was to talk about how bad the Jindal administration was, right? So that was Stenger's role when he had this bipartisan coalition in 2012 and 2013, 2014.
I think where it then began to manifest itself more was when he was first, after he won the Democratic nomination. This is 2014. I think he had a vision on how he was going to run county government, and he was going to be delegating some things. He wasn't going to, except he was going to run more of it and not have a chief. Remember, for a while he was saying he wasn't going to have a chief of staff. Things kind of sort of blew up because just days after the primary, the Michael Brown death occurred. And that, I think, changed a lot of things. Wouldn't you agree, Jason?
I would think so. We actually had Mike Jones on the podcast in 2015, and I think he explained it best, and I'm going to play this right now.
Okay, just so for our listeners, Mike Jones is a former St. Louis alderman who later became like the chief advisor to Charlie Dooley, and Jones is terrific at kind of analyzing what's going on in politics.
The manner in which Dooley was treated was disrespectful to him, but by extension, disrespectful to the entire black political class and black political community, because black politicians lose races every day to white politicians, okay? And in a city or a county that's 75% white, I mean, you can't even say that was unusual. You couldn't even say that race was particularly the driver when he had won the job 3 times.
Right.
You could say that the time just ran out. But the whole tone and texture, I'd say starting with the Post-Dispatch editorial approach and just reinforced, seemed to be fundamentally disrespectful.
And I kind of want to give a sense to our listeners what he was talking about. One of the big elements of Stenger's campaign against Dooley was pointing out different aspects of supposed corruption within his administration.
Well, and he did have some aides or advisors, and these were not like just African Americans. I mean, these were African American and white. We can remember John Temperiti, who was a key advisor and money raiser, who formerly had been active in city politics. I mean, Dooley had a lot of powerful or influential Democrats who had been helping him, and some had checkered reputations. And Stenger tried to take advantage of that by basically saying, elect me, I'm going to clean up county government, I'm going to be the new sheriff in town, and all that.
Police commissioner receives an HVAC contract on a police crime lab. And the conflict of interest is just fairly obvious. And it's either the result of some type of incompetence or some kind of a lack of acknowledgement that transparent government and government that's accountable is very important to taxpayers in St. Louis County and very important to residents of St. Louis County. And having confidence in your local government is it's the cornerstone of government.
Would it have been possible, since it was not to get too much in the weeds, but this was a subcontract that was given by a main contractor, would there have been any way that the county could have intervened and said to that contractor, you can't do this, this is a conflict of interest?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, it would have been a direct order from the county executive that cannot happen because it's in direct violation of the charter.
That was from 2013, by the way, and it's reeking with irony given that Stenger is going to jail for steering contracts to his political donors.
What I meant by bullying, I understand he said a pretty fraught relationship with the African American community. But what I meant, or what stuck out to me, is things like trying or at least talking about getting Sam Page fired from the hospital he works at, like dismissing county employees that he doesn't agree with, reworking things so that he can have sign off on basically every county employee that's hired. That stuff strikes me as like what I think of as Chicago style politics.
Well, some of it, and I'm not justifying it, but some of it is, I mean, the county executive, whoever it is, has a lot of power.
Right.
And we've had only a handful of county executives during St. Louis County's tenure. Frankly, the first few were Republicans, and they were also very much muscular, controlling everything. I mean, Gene McNary, who was county executive for, I think, roughly 15 years, was very muscular about that, and so was Westfall when it changed parties. So some of that, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that that wouldn't be something that would raise alarm bells among some county residents who are basically interested in making sure their trash is picked up, that the streets are clean, and the fact that we have so many municipalities. A lot of people turn to their local governments, and so the county is just kind of out there floating over them. So I could see where some of that, it wouldn't get as much attention, let's say, as the mayor of St. Louis. I mean, I'm not saying that Cruzen does that, but the point is people are always paying attention to how the mayor of St. Louis acts, whoever it is.
Well, I have one example, and that is when there was an instance that Stenger wanted to create an ice rink for the St. Louis Blues at Creve Coeur Park, which had been approved by the council, by the way. But after Stenger had lost control of the council, they wanted to revisit it. The council, that is.
Well, part of it's because Page claimed they had been lied to about stuff.
And this was the very public confrontation between the two.
Well, it is a mistake. But I know the dog ate your homework, and the sun was in your eyes, so you have a hard time with that. Hey, look, we have to take ownership of what we've done. You voted for it. You were the proponent of it, and the council approved it unanimously. Who are you trying to fool here?
Mr. County
Who are you trying to fool?
There were no
Mr.
hearings.
Chairman,
There
were
no
hearings. You had a public vote two times. You had a public vote two times that offered speakers the opportunity to speak.
To disclose the restricted use of the land
Absolutely,
prior to the vote.
as everything else was disclosed.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
So.
And you were fooled again.
Right.
I guess you were fooled again. Just like you were fooled 4 other times this year. You were fooled about the auditor. You were fooled.
Mr. Chairman.
That was pretty embarrassing. And in retrospect, Stenger looks really petulant and immature, even though I think he has the right to be frustrated given that,
on that particular issue.
Because the council basically reversed course after approving it. That's just not the way you act when you run into controversy like that.
So can you all explain why the relationship with Stenger, who had been on the council, and the council deteriorated so quickly after he was elected?
Well, once he came into office, Stenger quickly ran into trouble with other fellow Democrats who were on the council still, or newly elected, who on various issues, because they would want information on things, and they would claim that his administration wasn't giving them the information they needed.
In fact, here's Hazel Irby talking about that.
We don't get any cooperation. When that legislation comes down, no one talks to us. It was unheard of in the prior administration that legislation came down for us to vote on, and no one came and explained it to us or why it was necessary. You know, we can read. Yes, we can read, but tell us why you're doing this. Tell us what's hidden in there. Tell us what it means. We don't get that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that started happening, and there was a feeling that, as I said, county executives have power anyway. But it seems like Stenger, who, when he was on the council and even when he was running, I mean, he was very assertive and ambitious, obviously, but he could use a charm offensive. I mean, you know, he was always really nice to reporters and that sort of thing. With the council, once he was in office, became more of a don't question my decision thing. And that became repeated on a number of issues. And in some cases, they weren't even big ones, but then it would create a lot of animosity. So then when something big did come up, there was already suspicion about him.
Well, to take it a little bit more specifically, when he was inaugurated in 2015, 6 of the 7 council members were aligned with him, except for Irby. And that included the 2 Republicans on the council. And then over time, the Republicans split with him, I think, on a couple of issues. One was increasing legislation or increasing regulations for landlords that caused a split, and also standards for police departments also caused a split with Republicans and Irby as well. And then what ended up happening was Ernie Trachis won the South County seat that Stenger used to serve in.
And Tracus is a Republican.
And so that added another Stenger adversary. Rochelle Walton Gray knocked off Mike O'Mara, who was probably Stenger's biggest ally on the council.
Yeah, and Rochelle's a Democrat, as was,
And then Page turned against him after the 2016 election cycle, even though Page had also been an ally of Stenger. So by the time 2017 rolled along, the only ally left for Stenger was Pat Dolan, who was the 5th District Councilman, and he eventually was ousted by Lisa Clancy after 2018. So going into 2019, he had 0 allies through a combination of just falling outs and just people losing elections.
Yeah, I did a story on this early, I think it was late 2017, early 2018, and I interviewed every member of the council, and even the Republicans who often agreed with him on the issues were just so frustrated by the lack of communication. I mean, Wassinger had been encouraged by fellow Republicans to actually run for county executive in 2018. And frankly, some people, including myself, I'm just looking at it strategically, she might have had a decent chance if she had run. So I think that he was in hostile territory, and amidst all this, there questions then began arising about his donors, about people who were getting county business. Now, again, I want to say that it's not unusual, whoever is county executive, for some of their allies to end up with county business. And I'm not justifying it, but I'm just saying that happens. But in his case, there seemed to be already rumblings that county procedures weren't being followed, that these pay-to-play accusations were starting to bubble up, and it was unclear how much was just rancor over the already tense relations with the council, or if there was something more to it.
I think that actually the pay-to-play accusations came up during the 2018 campaign, and Mark Mantovani, who ran...
Well, they did, because of this. He redeveloped or pushed to redevelop
Northwest Plaza.
Yeah, Northwest Plaza, which is just off Lindbergh in North County. Now, I mean, in North Central County. And what's interesting is that actually the residents of St. Anne, where the plaza is, a lot of the leaders there were actually very happy with how things have improved there. But some of the members of the council, including Page, while we're kind of raising questions about how his allies got these contracts and all this, which has basically led to where we are today. But my point being is that even some of his critics, like Hazel Irby and Rochelle Walton Gray, were trying to be careful about how they challenged him because they were pleased with the development.
Okay, with that as a backdrop, that did become an issue during the 2018 campaign. Here's Mark Mantovani talking with us on a Politically Speaking that year.
I know this. If it's demonstrable that the leases in Northwest Plaza were a consequence of illegal activity, bribery, and the like, I believe those leases are voidable. You can't profit from illegal activity.
Is that what you're alleging? Do you think that the county executive took bribes for that to happen?
I clearly believe there's a pay-for-play relationship here. Absolutely, I do. Yeah. You don't? You think that $375,000 is
I'm not
just
saying you don't,
coincidental?
but that's a serious allegation. And
So do you think that the Circuit Attorney Bob McCullough should be investigating
Or Prosecutor Bob McCullough.
Prosecutor. I apologize. Prosecutor Bob McCullough.
Of course this should be investigated. Of course. I mean, it's written about, it's talked about. Everybody in the community talks about this. People laugh about it. They call it the Glarner Mall. Of course this should be investigated. I have no doubt about that.
Now, just to make it clear, Stenger was not convicted for that particular situation. He was convicted because he steered a sham marketing contract as well as tried to steer insurance contracts and land deals to John Rallo. But that was clearly one of the things he was accused of when he was accused of pay-to-play.
One thing I want to make clear to our listeners, I mean, Mantovani, who was his Democratic rival in 2018, was a businessman. There was accusations against Mantovani from Stenger and others that he was really a Republican. I think that if, let's say, County Assessor Jake Zimmerman had challenged him, Zimmerman opted not to because he didn't want to split the vote. But if some Democrat who was respected within the party had challenged Stenger in 2018, Stenger might actually have gotten knocked off despite the strong union support that he had.
I want to play a clip from Stenger's recent 2019 appearance on St. Louis on the Air to give a sense to the listeners how he responded to these pay-to-play allegations.
I just finished an election year. I won my last election by 20 points. And the first election that we had, the Democratic primary, was a very contentious election. And so arguments like that are made, and the contract that you're referring to was quite literally, we're in 2019 and we're still talking about a 2016 contract that was one contract of hundreds that were let by the Economic Development Partnership, and it was let through a request for a proposal process, all consistent with the internal processes. And look, everyone's had an opportunity to look at this and examine it every way that it can be examined. And, of course, nothing's come of that or any of the other allegations that have ever been made because, frankly, there's just nothing to them.
I want to go back a little bit to his relationship, I guess, with the council and frankly, with other people. I think Joe kind of mentioned this. I'm not saying that a lot of politicians do illegal things, but it's certainly not unusual for people's supporters to get some business of government, like that a lot of times people who are getting government business line up with donors. That's not always that unusual. I guess I'm a little confused about whether you think the communication with the council was so poor because we know maybe he wasn't in the office very much, or whether he was trying to exert control.
Well, I think, in my personal opinion, for whatever reason, I think once more of his enemies, or let's put it this way, more members of the county council became his political enemies. Stenger rarely went to council meetings, although sometimes he was around, so you could actually, I interviewed him several times after council meetings, to get his reaction to something that happened. He wanted to avoid the confrontations like what Jason recently played, but I think that you had a sense that he wasn't as engaged, which actually surprised me because when he ran for office and was pushing way back in 2013 and 2014. He seemed to be driven towards being county executive, and it seemed like, 2017 on, he didn't seem to, he did run for re-election, but you had a sense that his heart wasn't in it.
Well, here is Stenger again on St. Louis on the Air talking about that exact issue Joe was just talking about.
I do my very best to make it when I can, but once again, I don't vote, and there really isn't much I do at those meetings. And it's not a meeting where there's usually debate, or I should say even in some cases legitimate debate. It's more, it's at times there's a bit of a circus atmosphere.
Well, it's causing people to ask, if you can't get along with a council of 7 members, how would you get along with a council of 33 as this super mayor under the Better Together proposal?
Yeah, and I would tell you that this may seem counterintuitive, but it's perhaps not. It's more difficult to get along with 7 people who have, in some cases, not all 7, by the way, but in some cases who have political axes to grind than it is to work with 33 individuals where there is, much more diversity of views and, perhaps political persuasion.
Yeah, he was answering a question that Don Marsh had asked about why he wasn't at county council meetings, right. And I think it's important to say that the county council members recently, a letter was released, and they said that they felt like he wasn't in the office very often, that he was arriving late, that he was playing video games in the office. I don't know where they're getting all that information, but Steve Stenger is out. We have a relatively new county executive, Dr. Sam Page, who was is it fair to say a nemesis of Steve Stenger?
Yes.
At the end?
Absolutely.
And they appear to have pretty different demeanors. What do you all think? Can you all explain the differences between the two? How they? I'm talking more about how they handle themselves in the position?
Well, one thing that I think is a big difference is Steve Stenger went from being a councilman to county executive, and he had relatively little political experience compared to Page. Page has been a Creve Coeur city councilman. He was a state representative. He ran for statewide office and almost won. He ran for state senate and lost pretty overwhelmingly. And then he transitioned back into county government. All the while, he is an anesthesiologist who had like another life to him besides being in politics. I should also add that similarly to Stenger, Page came from pretty modest upbringing in southern Missouri.
So we had, reduced price lunches, but there were certainly folks that were worse off than we were. I mean, I think rural Missouri has just as much poverty as some of our urban areas, and it's interesting to see the Medicaid expansion debate, not entirely reflect that. But I knew folks personally that were much worse off than my family, and folks that were much better. But we had a lot of extended family members, cousins, and grandparents, and everybody made sure that you had enough to eat, and you had clothes. And one thing that helped me, and that I hope will help the younger folks in St. Louis County, is that I was able to get a good education, and I was lucky that my mom was a teacher, and she impressed that upon us. I went to the University of Missouri on a full ride, and eventually went to medical school, and I've been lucky.
Where I think that they're different is that Page, I think, is used to the give and take in politics, and I don't think takes things super personally, at least outwardly. I do know that he can be very competitive and has clearly been seeking to make a mark in politics for a long time. And there are some people that really like him, and there are some people, because of some of the campaigns he's run in the past, don't. But
yeah, I mean, because it's funny. Page has his own set of Democratic, I wouldn't know if it's say enemies, but people who are critical, and many of them are women lawmakers from in the county who were upset with him for the way he ran his state senate primary contest against Barbara Frazier, and this goes way back. So my point is that he also has to deal with a little bit of that. On the other hand, I think because of his high office at the hospital, he's used to he has a management style. He's used to managing a lot of people, which I think gives him a leg up over Stenger in that now Page is running county government. He's used to dealing with a lot of different department heads, having to deal with all that. He also is very mindful of trying to restore the image of integrity that the county government long had. So I think I think the questions that many Democrats have about Page is whether or not he will decide to actually run for the job, which will mean for him a big hit in income if he feels that running this office is more important to him, and whether or not Republicans try to come up with a
real candidate
with a real candidate to challenge, or do they decide to back off? I mean, Tim Fitch, who is the former police chief who was on the county council, Fitch has told us on a podcast he wouldn't do it because he's making so much money in his private security practice.
And, like Colleen Wassinger is a possibility, but I think the fact that she didn't do it in 2018 makes it unlikely she'll do it in 2020, especially since she would have to probably spend a lot of her family's personal money to do it.
Well, yeah, and her husband, had lost a race for state auditor. But I think that also, though, she got along fairly well with Page, as did some others during Page's multi-year tenure as head of the county council. So I think that it's going to be interesting how he uses the goodwill that he right now has from some council members in both parties, how he uses the goodwill that he has with many African-American politicians who don't necessarily know him well, but are willing to give him a chance, seeing how this goes. But again, there's some Democrats, notably women lawmakers in St. Louis County, some of them, who are still wary. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I would say I am obviously very new to all of this, but I was struck. So I did read through his 100-day report, and I was struck by the fact that two things he was emphasizing was one, to Joe's point, trying to talk about how he's trying to restore confidence in county government, make the county employees feel better, that type of thing. Remember, this is mostly a political document, let's be honest. And the other one is there's a lot of time spent on transparency measures. So I'm recording, I'm going to all the county council meetings. I'm recording my report to the county council. The county council is now going to be meetings are going to be live streamed. So, I mean, there's clearly some, some PR, if you will, although there's some substantive, there's an effort to try to look like I'm being transparent and I care about the county employees in a way that Steve Stenger doesn't.
Well, I think, Page really does want to reinforce his image, some of which is definitely valid. About while he was chairman, was trying to get more transparency, trying to get more facts on issues.
And
as a journalist, I will say that Page was always receptive as far as interviews, even on the fly right after the council meetings, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see how he goes forward. He's hired a number of former journalists for different posts, which may or may not be a good thing.
And I'll be interested to see how he deals with conflict. Right now, I think everyone is giving him a chance. I would be interested to see how he deals with that compared to Stenger, basically.
It's a question of how do you handle your differences. If you disagree with someone, do you lash out, do you call them names, and do you try to insult them, or do you sit down and have a conversation about where the common ground is? And for nearly all of the first term of this county executive, if you didn't agree with him, then his job was he felt like his job was to try and attack and humiliate and all the sort of things that you don't see in rare circumstances, except at the national level. You don't see that in most systems of governance.
Yes. So I think a lot of people within the party are going to be watching him again, because it's not like he's been. He's had, various political history over the last 10 years. So, and he is an intellectual, and he has his personality is a bit different than Stenger's, but there's no perception, I've never gotten the perception that he's a bully, or, he tries to use other ways to get his point across. And so I think it's going to be interesting going forward to see how Page reshapes county government in his image and tries to alleviate the suspicions that were left and the bad taste that were left by Stenger's shocking drop, in grace, and now he's headed to prison.
When you played that county council clip, that sounded like a totally different body. The county council, the 3 meetings I've been to, it's mostly like kumbaya.
Well, I'll be interested to see if we do a Page retrospective podcast, whether we're playing a similar skirmish between him and someone else.
I think Page would handle it differently.
Well, thanks, Joe and Jason, for coming here to talk about Steve Stenger, the rise and fall. And for all of our stories, please visit stlpublicradio.org. And my name's Julie O'Donohue. My Twitter handle's JSO'Donohue. Joe?
Joe.
I still am active on Twitter, and that's at JMannis. That's JMannies.
You can follow me at J Rosenbaum.
Yeah, and we hope to have Joe in much more often.
Sorry about that.
See you later, folks.
Please